Hello and welcome to another Focus Friday brought to you by Mapex and Majestic. My name is John Harville and it's a pleasure to be here once again. We're having a great time doing these. We hope that you are having a great time watching. I'm really excited about my next guest. He's been doing this activity for about a few years. He's a wealth of knowledge. He's on staff at UCLA. He's the program coordinator and percussion director for Pacific Crest Drum and Bugle Corps, and we're going to have just a ton of fun. It's a pleasure to welcome Glen Crosby. How are you doing?
Hey, John. Oh, wait a minute. Let me get in the camera. There we go. It's good to be here.
Thanks for stopping, man. Thanks for joining up with us, and we're gonna just dig in as far as we can into that head of yours.
It's kind of big too.
Big. So you've been doing this for about what did we say, 5-6 years?
Something like that, times 8, I think. If
right.
Actually, I mean, I started out I started out when I was 9, back outside of Toronto, in a little like drum and bell corps, and then I started in DCI stuff in 1980 with Blue Stars, and I went to Blue Devils the year after that. Mm-hmm. Then that's 40 straight years of being involved, pretty much.
Right. You've probably forgotten more than a lot of us have ever known about this activity.
Oh man, I don't know. I hope so. If I remembered everything, that would be, I don't know.
Right.
Scare myself, actually.
What have you been doing in this time of isolation and quarantine?
A lot of gardening, actually. It's been a few years since I had a real garden in my backyard, so we decided, you know what, this is a good time to actually maybe think about being a little more self-sustaining. So we got a decent garden going in the backyard. It's going to keep expanding. I practice sometimes. I've never been super self-motivated at practicing. I prefer the environment of having a lot of people around, and I'll play forever if I do that. But there's times I go to extremes where I'll pull out a book like Tom Hannum's check pattern book and read through the entire thing in a day. Or in the stick control book, one day I did all 194 flam patterns over like an hour and a half, 2-hour period. I think I did the first 100, took a half-hour break, and then went back and did the last 94 just to see if I could get through it. You know, if I could force myself to sit. And by the time I got to the end, it was great. I mean, there's still some patterns. It's amazing as long as I've been playing. All you got to do is go through everything in the stick control book, and you're going to find ones that are going to trip you up. And it's like, oh, well, I guess I still have plenty to learn.
Right. Yeah, I guess we can all keep on practicing. Probably never just get to where we need to be.
You know, the one thing too with the gardening, just real quick, something that I never knew, and we started following a guy on Instagram named Ron Finley, and he started talking about regrowing vegetables. I had no idea you could do this. So we've been taking like onions, celery. You just cut off all the celery. You have the bottom part of the stalk, stick it in water, and it'll start growing roots, and you'll have the celery stalk that'll start growing out of the middle of it. You can do that with onions, green onions. It's a trip. But it's like, I know most of my friends had no idea. I didn't know, but it's another part of just like, it's actually, well, in the situation that we're in, the fact that you're bringing any kind of life into the picture is kind of a psychological boost in a weird way. So I get up in the morning, and the first thing is I go to the kitchen table and see how far have these guys grown, you know, and every day it's like, damn, those things grew a lot overnight, you know. So
right.
Anything to occupy myself, and lots of music listening, lots of Snarky Puppy and all the offshoot bands from Snarky Puppy. There's one called Bocante that's really, really cool to check out. It kind of reminds me, like being in the marching arts, I guess there's a certain part of it that's attracted me to it because it has the Metropole Orchestre, and instead of a drum set player, there's 3 percussionists that have these really cool setups, and it's more like a little, you know, a drum section. But there's like symphonic music mixed in with world music. So it kind of goes all over the place, but it's really inspiring to see that kind of music being made right now. To me, some of these guys are like the modern day Mozarts. I mean, there's so much cool stuff they're coming up with. I've never heard things like this before. So I obsess with those types of things right now.
You think a lot of that will make its way into your shows and the things that you coordinate?
It's always possible.
Yeah.
I try not to listen to music to find show music. You know what I mean? I just listen to it, and sometimes I'll bring things to the table and let other people decide. So yeah, maybe, you know, or something like this. If we're looking for a particular style, then maybe I'll throw something in the mix that way. But I try to avoid, I think one of the reasons why I still love doing the marching arts is because I teach and then I get away from it too. I don't obsess about it constantly from like season to season, because it's easy when you're, when you go from fall season to the spring, the wintertime stuff, the indoor stuff, and then to drum corps, man, it's like, this endless cycle of only band music. And I think as a musician, it's unhealthy to get too caught up in one thing and not take some time to get away from it and go to other genres and just, go looking for things you've never heard before.
Right. I think it's also cool when it works in reverse. I remember in the early 90s when the Blue Knights did a Little Green Man as the drum solo in 93.
Yes.
So that introduced me to Steve Vai. And
Yes.
I've loved Steve Vai ever since. But I would have never, gone to Steve Vai first. So it feeds different ways.
No, you're absolutely right. I can remember when I first went to Garfield Cadets in 1985. We did Bernstein's First Symphony, and I had, you hear some orchestral stuff, but I'd never really had to dig in on an orchestral piece, and that was a crazy one too, because there's odd meters all over the place. But that really turned me on to Aaron Copland, all the American composers, Leonard Bernstein, and then from that extended on to every other kind of symphonic music too. So yeah, it does work both ways. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, well, you just mentioned the Garfield Cadets. We're talking Cadets, SCV, Capital Regiment, Velvet Knights, Blue Knights, Carolina Crown, Academy, the Freelancers. You're coming at this from a pretty well-rounded point of view, and that's just the DCI stuff.
Right.
WGI, how long have you been doing the WGI thing?
Let's see. It started, like, there used to be a kind of a winter, it was an outdoor circuit in California in the mid to early to mid 90s, somewhere around there before WGI got started. So I judged a little bit. There's an association out here. I judged that for a while and then let that go. And then once the WGI stuff started to really kick in, my daughter actually went to Los Alamitos High School. And it was really funny because she started out as a freshman. I think like one of the first meetings they had, the band director kind of looked at her and said, "So when's your dad coming in?" And she's sitting there going, "Uh-oh." And I said, "How would they even know me?" It's like, I don't get that. So I started working with her high school, and then Ian Grom and John Mapes were both writing the show music for them. So I talked to Grom one day, and he's like, "Hey man, come over." So we hung out a little bit during an ensemble rehearsal and got along immediately. I was like, "Okay, I can work with you. Like, if you guys want me to come around, I'll be the happy dad volunteer. It's on a little different scale than most. I won't be building props for you guys, but I'll fix it."
You're not out there with the shower and the ballad. Cleaning the stuff.
That year was my first experience pushing a marimba up the ramp at WGI, and I almost had a stroke about halfway up. It was like, man, what is this? It was crazy.
Yeah, we all missed that WGI didn't come to be this past year, but I don't think anybody's missing that ramp.
I didn't miss the ramp at all, no. So from there, then Ian and John had just taken over at Pulse. So Ian asked me, you want to come over and maybe do a little bit of work there? So I hopped on there in 2009 for a little bit, kind of just check things out. And then in 2010, I started going in more regularly and stayed up until this past season. That was my last.
Mm-hmm. So, all right. So you just took us back to 2009. Go back one more year into the summer of 2008. That's kind of where the relationship started with Mapex, right? Tell us a little bit about that summer at the Academy and how we've gone from 08 to where we are now.
Oh man, before that year started, sometime during the winter, Sam Palafian and Pat Sheridan were always working on the brass instruments, the quantum brass stuff. And there was a little shop in Long Beach, and they were just one day, they said, "Hey man, come over and we want to show you something." So I stopped by, and they had a snare drum, a set of tenors. I think it was just a snare drum and a set of tenors. And I was like, "Oh, so what's up with these?" So I checked them out, snare drum, sounds cool. I picked up the tenors and went, "Okay, this is right. You got this one right away." So I was checking those out. I'm going, all right. So, we got into discussions, and it seemed like, based on everyone that I met, and it just seemed like everyone was really good people. They wanted to do the right thing. It was going to be a quality product. So it's like, all right, let's do it. And actually, even that first year, because I think we ended up using the walnut tenors instead of maple. And that really kind of sold me. When we got into the summer, there was something about there was a couple times when I was standing in front of the drum line and we were playing a unison exercise in like that poltergeist setup. We have snares and tenors all mixed in. And they were playing on the 12-inch drum, the tenors were, and just playing a unison exercise with the snares. And all of a sudden this sound, I just heard this warmth kind of wrap itself around the snare drum sound. I'm going, this is a unique combination. So I was going, all right, this is, that's kind of what sold me on just the basics of what was going on and how there's obviously quality there and some variety. The fact that we could choose between the two made it that much more enjoyable just to work with. And since then, I mean, things have just have been upgraded. I know at one point I had mentioned about maybe putting some walnut in some of the snare shells to see how that would change the characteristic sound of snare drums. But I mean, honestly, it's been a great relationship for 12 years. Everyone's always very receptive to any ideas. The product continues to get better. There's always things that can be better, but that goes for anyone.
Yeah.
I just enjoy being around the people in the company, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah, vice versa, man. As coming in this past year and getting to know you and Stuart and all those guys, it's been such a great relationship to talk. And I was really looking forward to seeing what you guys do with the Quantum 2 snares. You guys had them out there last year at Pacific Crest. I thought last year's sound was. We talked about it in Texas. You and I went down into the cooler part of the dome.
Yes, we did.
and we talked for quite a long time. I was like, the blend and the sound that you're getting out of it. And, you guys were doing a lot of homework even over this season, in the off season. I was really looking forward to hearing what capitalize on this coming summer. But
yeah, we I know with our snare tech, Matt Allen, he came over to the house after you sent out some of those different guts to check out. And we checked it in a small room. We're at the point where we're going, okay, we need to get these things actually tuned up the way we want them and then take them out and start comparing them, either put them in a line of drums or compare them to other ones and see what they're like from about 20 yards away. I mean, you can only get so much being right on top of the drum. I need to be back to hear what it sounds like from a little more of a distance. But yeah, it was something that we were experimenting with. I mean, that's the one thing. I always think there's a better way. I don't care how long I've been around this. I like having a good young staff of people, and I tell the staff to be innovative. Like, I'm not a dictator. I like to let people do their work. If I pick them, I should let them teach. Otherwise, what's the point? And most of the guys I already knew from either being in Pulse or I either taught with them or taught them in a group and knew what their personalities were like. So it's like, yeah, I want your guys' ideas. I see what you're doing when you're messing around. It's like, I can't do that anymore. Teach me something, right. So that cycle, I mean, it's been the same way, going back to people like Murray Gussick, was a 17-year-old kid in Santa Clara's tenor line back in '88. And, we had no idea what kind of a genius we had on our hands until he came out with a piece of paper he handed to me and Ralph at a rehearsal one night in early 1990. He's like, hey man, can I teach this to the guys? And it's just like some chicken scratch on a piece of paper. We're like, yeah, go ahead, teach it. Ralph was always real cool about encouraging people to bring in things. If you write something, bring it in, let's play it and see where it's at, So after a while, Ralph and I were having a coffee or something inside the bingo hall, and we come walking out and the drum line's playing this thing. And we just looked at it and go, what the hell is this? Like, I couldn't tell where one is, but the thing was grooving so hard. I've never heard a drum line like play any, real groove. And it was Martian Mambo. It was a piece in 11/16 that you're sitting there and you're going, you want to move. And then you go, okay, I'll just keep moving. But I'm not sure what's going on here, but this is pretty amazing, So another one, I mean, a student who I've learned a lot from over the years with the way he approaches stuff, that's just, for me, it's just the endless cycle of, I don't know everything. There's still lots to learn. Even, another one, I talked with a gentleman who was one of the percussion professors over at Long Beach State, Dave Gerhardt. And I was just telling him how, I haven't really done that much with concert snare drumming. I mean, I read through the books, but I've never really studied with an orchestral guy. But I was just telling him how, my buzz rolls they just kind of suck. They're not as good as they should be. And he said, yeah, it's all about the ring finger. And I'd never heard that before. And I just went, and as soon as he said it, I went back, sat down and played and went, you've got to be kidding me. It changed everything immediately. So you never know, even when, one little tidbit of information from anyone can influence you. It could be, I've had conversations with Pat Sheridan about how he approaches, say, what was the conversation I had about, I was saying, how do you guys play like accents and low notes? Like you have an accent pattern, how do you approach it? The answer was so simplistic. I was like, well, yeah. He said, well, you just focus on playing the low notes and then you play the high notes and you combine the two. The way he said it, I'm probably oversimplifying, but just the way he explained it was like, yes, that's another way I can explain that to a student, without getting into like, well, you have to downstroke here and hold it exactly that way and you press the fingers or whatever, people teach. It was like, no, it's pretty basic. You're combining loud notes and soft notes. So you have a negotiation between where the last loud note is and where the first soft note starts. Other than that, listen, pay attention to what it sounds like and listen for balance,
Right. I've always appreciated the instructors that really in their comments and everything is geared towards the kids to push them along faster or, in a more efficient way than seeming very heady, and something like a simple comment someone said, just, instead of saying, you're an eighth note fast, somebody just saying, have a little patience on that.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay.
It's a thing of having, more tools in the toolbox, for lack of a better way to put it, and knowing your audience. You have to know the personalities of the people that you're teaching. If I do clinics or if I'm doing like just a rehearsal with a group, I want to make sure that if I make a correction, I look at everybody and say, if you don't understand what I mean, tell me to explain it a different way. Because I usually think I should have about 10 different ways to explain the same thing if you're really going to get to everybody so they understand it. And I just want to make sure it's like, if you don't get it, ask me again. It's my job to get the information to you so you understand it. And that takes a little more effort, but that's the way it goes.
Well, speaking of your toolbox, man, you got a ton of things going on out there on the West Coast, on the private lessons. You got a ton of private lessons, UCLA, Pacific Crest, but it's kind of, I've seen out of you, a lot of ensembles really like to bring you in maybe after they've put a lot of the pieces of the puzzle together to see if you can finally tighten it up. So, what's that like being, the ensemble guy? What are you listening for when you go into a brand new ensemble? Maybe you're hearing it for the first time and you've got to take it, because I've always said it's probably easier to take an ensemble from 0 to 90, 93 than it is to take it from 93 to like 97, like that, how to squeeze out those tenths of a point. So like when you're at the end of a season and, here comes Glen, what are you looking for when you're trying to just squeeze out those last bits of, points or just clarity in the ensemble?
I start out by walking in, observing. I don't talk right away. I stand back and be as incognito as possible and watch the way the rehearsal is being run and ask the staff a lot of questions. Or I'll start out with asking the staff a lot of questions. Then finally, when it's time to kind of get in with the ensemble, then I'll usually bring everybody in and ask them to explain their show to me. A lot of times, if it's a group that's really already playing at a high level in terms of just the mechanics of playing, then I'll go to straight performance. And that comes with, sometimes, I think one of the most common things I say to groups that'll help a lot, that has helped actually a few groups I can say specifically in terms of getting to the next level that everyone talks about, is having the pit and the battery have the same musical point of view. There's times when a group can play really, really well, but just in terms of, from a performance standpoint or an emotional standpoint, are both sections conveying the same thing? Because if they're not, it does get in the way. And so, from an audience member standpoint or someone who's adjudicating, you want a clear musical message that you're trying to get across. And sometimes the pit might be approaching things a little more, a little less aggressive than the battery, or the opposite is mostly true, where the battery is approaching something way too aggressive compared to what the music is telling them what to do. So finding a balance between those two, that's kind of what the thing is. There's a book that I'm actually rereading right now that I use a lot of stuff from as far as performance goes, called An Actor Prepares. It's by a Russian director named Antonin Stanislavski, and apparently it's like the acting Bible. If you act, this is the first volume of what you should be reading. But it talks about the process of going through that, where we talk about flipping a switch as a performer. but there's a process that you go through to get yourself, obviously you have to have the mechanics of what you're doing completely down to be able to free yourself up for inspiration, basically, where you can be real as an actor. Like, you don't want to, you know, take a part and be overacting. You know, you want to actually feel like you're the character, whatever that is in that particular situation. So you got to like shut everything else off, and it has to be as if it's just you and I having a conversation, you know, and how that actually plays out. So I apply those concepts to performing ensembles anywhere, whether it's a percussion ensemble, you know, a concert ensemble, or especially for the indoor stuff now. Because I mean, the performance level, especially for the battery people, has to be, you know, it has to be a little over the top, but at the same time, getting that to be cohesive and make sure that everyone in the ensemble understands what's trying to be conveyed there is kind of the main focus when I do that. I actually wish sometimes, because people do wait to bring me in till after they're finished. And there's times I go in and go, oh man, you should have had me in like a month ago. I could have, because I mean, I can talk about performance, but I also just go, that part really doesn't work. I would change that, or adjust things, or balance stuff, or say, you know, take a look at this little section over here. You can clean that up. Because you want that perfect balance of, you know, the ultimate clarity and shaping and phrasing and everything that goes along with just the mechanics of music. And then you want the cherry on top where everyone really is free enough to express, you know, whatever emotion that is trying to be put across, and be able to go through different emotions as the program progresses too.
So, no, get everybody, get Glen out in the first quarter, and then have him come back in for the last quarter.
That would be the best way to do it.
That'd be the best way to do it. So, you know, you're in front of all these amazing, you know, drum corps that are achieving things at such a high level, the WGI groups and whatnot. Do you ever just get used to that level? Do you still have the joy of, you know, a youngster being able to spit out a double for the first time? You know, do you still enjoy the activity from the beginning all the way to, you know, the Jedi Knights?
Oh, absolutely. I have right now I've got about 5 or 6. I don't have like a ton of students right now. We'll talk about that in a little bit with the Pacific Crest thing that we just opened up. I have a couple freshmen, an 8th grader who's just getting started, who's going to be going into Los Alamitos High School in the fall. Yeah, I completely enjoy teaching. I don't care if the kid's putting his pair of sticks in his hand for the first time. You know, like you're saying, getting someone to understand rebound is a great thing. I get as much out of that as, you know, winning a gold medal, to be perfectly honest with you. And it seems weird, and everyone's going, yeah, right, sure you do. But actually, I kind of do. It's just fun. I've never not had fun teaching. It's enjoyable. And plus, I mean, I approach things from, you know, life skills first. Music is what you're teaching you're teaching life skills through music. So I know they're going to have some kind of a positive impact on these kids about how to deal with, you know, any kind of adversity. And I've told, like, I think the PC kids, we have these town halls every Thursday night. And then I think at one point I did say something about, you know, everything that you guys have been taught over the last few years, guess what? Now's the time to use it. You know, being patient, understanding how to persevere, being self-disciplined. I mean, there's so much that you kind of have to use now. That's the whole point of what we're doing, really. I mean, it's to perform, and that's great. And I love all that part of it too. But at the end of the day, once they leave, they better have some skills that they can use for the rest of their lives. Otherwise, you know, we're kind of selling them short that way.
That's another great way to think about it. I do want to get into being able to kind of take a very elevated, flying at, you know, 40,000 feet look at the activity. So from here all the way through the timeline, you and I had talked about it just a smidge. So I just know that it's interesting probably to think, you know, what was a drum corps camp like in February in the 80s versus, you know, February now? Or, you know, what could someone play back then that they can or can't now? Have we always evolved? Have we taken any steps back? You know, just sum all that up real quick.
Yeah, I can't say that there's much of a difference in terms of just the way a camp is run. It's more efficient. I think, you know, with over the last few decades, corps have become way more efficient the way they feed. I mean, everything about the organizations are much better. as far as the players, that it's, yeah, the activity has evolved beyond what anyone, could ever think. I mean, I hear some I don't know if this is going to be controversial, and I don't think it will be, but with the old school cats, some of these guys, that like, dancing around and ran. It's like, you know what? My response is pretty simple. These kids today can play 10 times what you played 30 years ago, and they can do cartwheels while they're doing it. So at that point, I just want to say, shut up. It's like, just let things need to evolve. I would not be involved in the activity if it hadn't changed over the 40 years. The thing that stops me in my tracks is when I feel like I'm doing the same thing. Even as a teacher, I went through a period of a couple of years ago where I got so tired of hearing, the same kind of things that I said. I actually had to have a conversation with myself and say, wait a minute, the people who you're talking to a lot of the times are hearing you for the first time. So relax. Like, you don't have to have something new every second of the day, and how you present the educational material that you use to teach. So I kind of calm myself down on that, because I like moving forward and looking for different things and evolving as much as possible. So, like, as far as the players go, I hate to say that they're more intelligent, but I think just because of the amount of information that you can get to nowadays, that automatically gives you more to work with. I can't even imagine having YouTube or something to find things to practice back in 1983 or 84. So I think just that alone. But kind of a funny story. We were talking about the indoor stuff a while ago. At one point, because I went through a period where the indoor stuff, I was like, it's just so loud, I can't deal. The balancing is balance has to be something that I have to, be comfortable with. So when I started working with Pulse, we were at a rehearsal one day. I'm pretty sure we were outside, and the snare line played a phrase, and there's all kinds of choreography going on. And they played it, and it sounded bad. So I was like, I stood there and went, what am I going to say? It's like, what should I, what do I need to do? Me just saying what I normally would, a normal correction I would give is not going to work. So I was like, all right. So I sat and thought for a second. I flashed back on all my daughter's ballet classes. I used to take her to private lessons. And if someone's teaching, I'm listening. And I, just listened to all the stuff he's telling her about her core and just to move. So I went up to Sarah and I said, and I just started talking about, being way more conscious of your core. So you have more control over the instrument. So as you're playing, it still feels like you're comfortable doing it. And they went back and came back and played the crap out of the phrase. It was great. It was so much better. And at that point, I just turned around and walked away. And I was laughing the entire time when I was walking away going, that's what it is now. That's part of the vocabulary. And still, it had an effect on the sound, which is what I'm supposed to do, is make the sound better. So at that point, it's like, all right, you have to pay more attention to what their bodies are doing and have a better understanding of how to manipulate a drum, which is static, on your body, but get them to the point where they can move freely, but still have complete command of what it is that they're playing.
Yeah, I think we can sometimes look back in the evolution of when we got up to we've evolved to this point, but then after we're done, we kind of stop and think, well, that's where it should stay. The same, I don't believe that progress should have stopped in the year 2000, the last time I ever competed. It's amazing what we were doing in 2000 doesn't even auditions, they're already playing better than that. So it really does take an open mind to look at the activity and say, all right, it's going to go in a direction that maybe we're not comfortable with, but there's no malice in it.
Yeah, the only people that aren't comfortable are the older people, because sometimes part of it is, I would guess, I can't say for sure, but I think some of it is you have drum corps people, and sometimes that's really, some of the best times I've ever had. So it's a reminder of what they felt, and when they see it change, it's like, well, wait a minute, that's not what I did. It's like, well, no, it shouldn't be what you did. And ultimately, the kids love what they're doing. The students, the members of all these groups, love the movement. They love the totality of what they're learning to do. And it does kind of break down some stigmas about, like, male dancers putting a drum on and dancing. It's like, it's not a big deal. This generation is way more comfortable with all this. So who am I or anyone else to judge when they love what they're doing and they do it at a high level? You know what I mean? And that kind of irritates me, actually. It's like, no, man, if the kids love it, I'm here to support that and try and help them get better. it's not about, me flexing my ego about how everything's been great the way I've done it the last 20 years. Who cares,
So maybe that's the running through line that has remained constant, that the kids are having a great time.
Yeah, they love what they do.
You had a great time in the 80s. I had a great time in the 90s. Kids are still, having a great time right now. And I think that's kind of the point of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I've always looked at it that way.
Right. Well, hey, tell me a little bit about, has your approach, obviously, as, we just talked about evolution. So I assume your approach to teaching has evolved over, the way you were teaching the Garfield cadets in '85. That's probably not how you're teaching with, Pulse nowadays. How has time and things evolved?
I'm smarter. Yeah, when you have experience, I think one thing I've thought about many times is I see sometimes. I think in anything, it could be athletics or music, but you see teachers that are just that personality never ever changes, and it's because they've had success or they've had like praise heaped on them or they've won some gold medals or whatever it is, and they just kind of get stuck and don't move forward. I don't think I'm less intense, but at the same time, it's a different kind of intensity. I'm here to help people get better, and over 30 something, years of doing this, I always think there's a better way. So I'm searching for something else to help out, to make students better too. So yeah, I hope I've evolved. I mean, I still look at stuff, and even like I told you with the concert buzz roll thing, ring fingers. It's like, that was an epiphany where I just went, this completely changes the way I play. Another incident with, a moment with a really close friend of mine who passed away almost a year ago, Ramon Banda, great Latin jazz player. He lived in the same area, so we had hung out, and I did some lessons with him. But I didn't, I knew some of the basics of Afro-Cuban style music, and he wanted me to play timbales on a tune with him and some really, really good LA session cats, and I was freaked out about it. But he's going, no. He goes, I got you. Like, just because he told me I had to play an open solo on this one tune, and I was like, okay, improvisation's not my thing. But he told me about a thing called the Cuban triangle, and it was just a rhythm that a lot of instrumentalists use in that style that kind of goes counter to the clave, whatever clave pattern that you're using. But he taught me it, and it was like, all of a sudden I understood so much more about how to solo in that style just from a few minutes, where he just ended up going, he started playing time, he's going, all right, go. And when I got done, he looks at me and goes, damn, man, you learn fast. But then I went back and started listening to a lot of Afro-Cuban music, and I found every instrumentalist used that at some point, not just the percussionists, So you never know where you're going to get good information from too. And it's always useful, whether it's from acting or like I watch Masterclass. I have a subscription to Masterclass, and I've been watching Ron Howard talk about directing, and in the process of that, he talks about how to deal with people, just managing people in a good way. So, I mean, like the biggest difference is my intensity level is, I was crazy back in my 20s. I think at the end of the day, most people, because I've actually asked some people, was I, and Murray Gusick in particular was one guy that said, you know what, you never yelled at us if we didn't deserve it. So I was like, okay, well, that's good to know, because when I think back, I'm going, I could get pretty crazy back then. But I think one of the things that I've always kept is when you're making a comment, no matter how intense it is, it can't be personal. There's people that cross that line, and there's a mean spirit behind something that they might say, where it's more about, you're making me look bad. It's not that I'm going to give you information. So that has been, I think, consistent in terms of treating people as humans, and still being someone who has demanded the absolute best. And now I just know how to do that without ever really raising my voice anymore.
Wow.
I keep people happy. I'm the happy guy at rehearsals, and people are like, how do you do that? It's like, well, I've been doing this for a while. It's all in the delivery,
Right. And how does that equate to just being more efficient in rehearsal and kind of connecting those neural pathways? And
well, no, I think it kind of goes back to what we're talking about, how a simple comment, you have to know whether you need to dig in on something for a little bit. Or even sometimes, if I'm going to go off on a little bit of a rant, I'll do it sometimes because I see fatigue in the ensemble. You see the people are a little bit tired, and another rep is not going to do anything. So then you take some time, take a breather, clear the heads. You can talk about something, crack a joke even, you know, and then when you know that everyone's kind of relaxed again, okay, now let's go do this again. And then just make sure everyone's mind is clear before you start, and usually works that way. Or it is just like, oh, that sucked. We all know that was bad. You know, doesn't mean I think you're bad people. I still love you guys. Go back and let's do what we're capable of. Just be ready this time.
Empty reps is
Yeah.
a thing.
Yeah.
Just because you can sit there and you have a 4-hour block in the blazing sun, you know, maybe.
Oh, you know, one of the things I do all the time is, and Ralph and I had done this years ago. He always called it dangling the carrot. All right, we have a 4-hour block. This is what we need to get through. When we get through this and we're all satisfied, we're done. I don't care what time it is. You know, there's no and really, when you're on a higher level, what I would do with, I think I started this back probably in the 80s with Santa Clara. It's like if they weren't on a working level, we would not start a rehearsal. If I didn't feel like everyone was at you know, their full potential to start, I'm not going to waste time, because you're learning bad habits. You know, so if you take the time to prepare when you start and get into a good groove, you get way more done. And then that's the whole thing about the brain accepting information, and it sticks because you're on a higher level in terms of the way your thought process is working. So you can get twice as much done in half the time and be as good as anyone in the country if you understand how to use that tool.
That's worth coming for right there. You know, that's a great one. I've never even thought about, all right, we're not going to start. You know, we're so wired to, you know, well, here's rehearsal time. This is when it starts.
No, I remember specifically, I don't know when it was probably in '88, where I could tell, I was just ready to go in my usual kind of crazy self. And everyone was a little too casual coming into like a weeknight rehearsal, because we still, like back then it was Monday, Thursday, everyone was in town. So it's like Monday night, Thursday night, and then all day Sunday. But if we weren't ready to start, I was just like, don't even think about touching your drums, because I already know what's going to happen and it's not going to be good. So we're not starting until we're ready to start.
But get ready to start soon, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh no. Well, back then it wouldn't take much to get a kick in the ass, you know, to get going too. Now it's like, it's just easier. You get smarter. You should be wiser. There should be a different way to do it. You know, if you're still screaming at people the entire time, you've learned nothing.
That's true. That's true. So, so you've been with all these groups, and of course, you know, you're not a one-man band. Who's had a lot of just influence over you and the way that you teach and the way that you evolve, and you know, who's you know, their way of doing this works its way into yours, and you know, who's some of those big names that are influential to you?
Oh man, there's so many. Well, the first one obviously is Ralph Hardiman. After I aged out, and we always saw each other, you know, Blue Devils in Santa Clara competing. And Ralph is always he's just one of those characters that you just, you know, you want to hang out with. So I think the first memory I have with him was when I was my age out year. We were at Whitewater, Wisconsin for a show. And it was still, at those days, we had like a prelims and a final show on the same day. But Blue Devils, we had just finished our prelim show and had some ridiculously high drum score. And Santa Clara was warming up. So I just kind of walked up and I was kind of standing there, and he looks at me and goes, "What'd you guys get?" And I told him the score. And all of a sudden I just feel this hand wrap around my neck and start squeezing. All in jest, of course, but we were just kind of cracking up. So we had crossed paths a few times. When I was done teaching cadets after '86, I moved back out to Northern California. And around June, Ralph had found out that I was hanging out, not doing anything. So he called me up. We went and had dinner. And he hired me on in like June of '87. And immediately, like the first time we went out and had dinner, it was like, oh, this is going to work. You know, we just had fun right away. But honestly, he was probably the most instrumental in me. That's my school. You know, I don't have a degree. I didn't go to college for percussion. I went to the Ralph School, basically. And he saw enough in me. I'll never me out in the public eye all the time and said, you know what, people need to hear what you have to say. From the first couple of years that we were together, he let me take over the technique program in '88, and I just learned so much from his writing. I mean, that's where a lot of my ensemble ears come from, because in '88, weird story, we were getting ready to leave on big tour, and I think the pit guy got fired the day before we left for like messing around with the music a little bit too much. Something happened. But all of a sudden I realized, I think I was like, we didn't have huge staffs back then. It was like, I was the only percussion guy on the road. I think our cymbal instructor was driving the director's motorhome or something. That was my backup. So I realized at that point, right before we left on tour, I realized I was going to be on the road for the first week by myself, and I'd never dealt with that before. You know, and I walked up to Ralph and going, dude, I was like, what should I do this week? It's like, I'm kind of freaked out. He just looks at me and goes, man, shut up and go teach. And that's it. And it was weird because all it did was make me go, oh, okay, well, obviously you think I can do this, so here we go. You know, and right there, I remember a time, because I'd never really worked with a pit before, you know, but all of a sudden we got on the road, we had a rehearsal, and I just kind of learned to clean everything from the podium. The drum majors would usually be with the brass section. So I got up, I conducted from the podium and just started absorbing everything. And that's when I learned how well integrated all of his music was. You started hearing voices matching. I'm going, oh, okay. So I guess I had some natural instinct about how music should sound. So, you know, and I was freaked out because I remember looking at all the keyboard players going, all right, I got a bunch of college music majors standing in front of me. I better have something to say, you know, because you're going to get ripped apart pretty quick if you don't have something. So it became more about, you know, general musical terms of getting the ensemble in line and shaped together and balanced. And that's really where I learned, you know, it expanded on that because Ralph allowed me to work with the entire music ensemble too. You know, so when he came in, I could get back on the field and do what I did. You know, that was kind of my forte, as being a technician. But when he wasn't on the road, it was like, all right, man, get up there. And then the other thing that always used to crack me up, we'd have so many clinics to do on tour, and after a while, he would very, you know, casually disappear right before the clinic was supposed to start. So I had to do it, even though I was thinking I was going to get a break and run away. He's going, oh no. And there were some big clinics too. So it's just like, he just threw me in the deep end, and he's going, I know you got to figure it out. It's cool. I mean, that's the biggest influence. I mean, other ones, I can go to Tom Hannum gave me my first gig teaching with Garfield. That was because we worked together teaching a senior corps right after I aged out. We spent a couple of weeks working with Reading Buccaneers, I think it was. And they ended up winning drums at DCA that year. So he hired me on at Garfield. And talk about going from Blue Devils to cadets was like either end of the world. It was, I mean, everything philosophically was completely different. The approach was different, but Hannum was great about allowing me to bring in what I knew just from the time I was with Blue Devils, because the one thing they didn't do is they just didn't play clean. They didn't play well together. And even you know, as a 21-year-old kid, and Tom Monks and I, he was also a new instructor that year. We got along great. Immediately, it was like this collaboration. You know, no one was trying to flex about we should do it this way. We would talk and just go, yeah, that works good, or that works good, and just kept going back and forth. But Hannum, I remember I think one of the first camps I walked in, I was like, dude, we got to go back to some basics. I said, the exercises that we're playing are really cool, but these players are really inexperienced, and they can't basically hold sticks, it seems like. I know I over-exaggerated when I was telling them. And he just said, go fix it. I was like, oh, okay.
Cool. No ego there.
No, it's like we all want it to be good. And I mean, being around, I guess I was so lucky to be around so many good people early on. And, you know, and since then too, it's like you find out that the best people, not necessarily the most successful, but the best teachers are the most open-minded. They're always looking for something else, always. And it doesn't mean that you have to constantly change, but you just never know when someone can influence you a certain way to make one other part of your teaching that much better. Or again, it gives you one more little tool that you can use if someone doesn't understand what you're talking about, you know, from being around. And that includes like, you know, again, Pat Sheridan, Sam Palafian, all the brass guys I worked with, Jim Prime, Michael Klesch, Wayne Downey, you know, these guys are just the best at what they do. And you know, any conversation is a good conversation, whether it's about, you know, art or not. It doesn't matter. There's just knowledge to be gained.
It's all transferable, no matter brass to percussion, percussion to brass.
Yeah, even with
color guard to.
And then even like we're talking about just the whole cycle of teaching Jim Casella and Murray Gussick, and then them taking over the program and come back to work with them and seeing what they do or what they did. You know, you can see there's some influence from what we had taught them, and there's all kinds of new stuff where I'm going, okay, I'm learning. I find myself enjoying situations where I can contribute and I'm learning at the same time, which is one of the reasons, like when I was with Crown in 2013, especially, like being around that brass section, good Lord. I've never been around anything that good. It's incredible the way those guys, and again, there's no ego. If I heard something, they would be saying, go get them. If you got something to say to the brass, go say it. And they had a certain mentality that was kind of like, they had a good balance of, they had like some percussion instructor mentality in the way they taught. They went after stuff and got ultra detailed. So, I mean, they could play as clean as a percussion section could. So I learned a ton just being around those guys that year.
That's cool. What a cool role reversal that is, to take like a Jim Casella or a Murray, and you're taking them while, you're up front, and then they come up and then they learn, and then the whole, that must have been a really cool thing, and to have a little bit of influence on there, and, a part of you becomes, into their teaching, and that's come from all these people in your past. It's such a cool how a bunch of rivers all flow into one, big ocean.
Oh yeah. They, and with Murray and Jim too, because I had taken a couple years off after '93, after Blue Nights in '93, the 5-hour-long drum solo that we did that year.
We're gonna have to get into it, and that's just selfish on my part. I gotta know, but yeah, continue on.
I took a couple years off, and then they took the program over in '96, and I just happened to see them at the NAMM show, and they're like, "Hey man, you want to think about maybe coming back out and doing a little bit of consulting?" I was like, with you guys? Absolutely. Like, I know you guys, and I know what you have to offer. Hell yeah, I'll come work with you guys. And that started that whole like 4 or 5 year run from '96 to like 2000, then 2003, 2004, which are the two best percussion sections I worked with.
Mm-hmm.
They were just,
Dustin Fletcher out there, and that's when we all met you a long time ago, and everybody just spoke highly.
Yeah, they just those 2 years, they could play anything, any style. That's the whole thing. It might not, they were really clean, but I don't go by just clean. Actually, well, I have a different definition of what clean is anyway. I mean, for me, clean is just not vertical alignment. It has to be every single note being shaped the same way, the exact same touch from player to player, the same emotional level. Then it's clean. When we get to that point, I'll say, okay, that's clean. But just vertical alignment doesn't do a whole lot for me.
Got it. Well, speaking of clean, like I said, when I was out San Antonio last year and saw PC, I was just shocked. I was like, golly. And we were sitting there in that lot. Is it Nate, the guy? Man, they were just getting at everything, every little start down low from the edge. And like I said, it makes sense what you've said, how each player in each section approaches the same piece of music. It wasn't like the snares are just playing it this way and the tenors, the tenors are clean. It seemed like everybody in a marching, drum out here for Pacific Crest is doing everything the same way. It was so across the board.
Yeah.
And then I came to you. I was like, man, how many vets are we talking about? What are we talking about?
Yeah, and the answer was 3.
Yeah, it's like 3. And I called you a liar.
Yeah, one snare and 2 cymbal players were the only vets in that line. But that's the whole thing. It's like when you talk about the ideas of getting twice as much done in half the time, having consistency throughout the staff. All those guys know what I look for in terms of sound, and I allowed them to innovate. I didn't spend much time with the percussion section like consistently until the last 2 weeks of the season. That's why I made a point to go in the last 2 weeks, because I wanted to make sure that we understood how to finish, regardless of what the competitive standing was. Part of the overall process that I wanted to get started here was like, we have to learn to finish no matter what, because that's going to be the most important thing. And most corps, I don't want to say most corps, but a lot of groups fail that last couple of weeks. They don't know what to do those last couple of weeks, and that's when the best teaching has to come in, because that's when you have to start talking about performance, and consistency, and not get into like overreacting to things that aren't clean. Because I guarantee you, I heard a story, a student who was in another group was just saying, oh yeah, man, they just like started ripping all these parts out the last 2 weeks. And I was like, oh, what a rookie move that is. Because it is. It's like at that point, no judge is going to know what you've taken out. They already have their perception of where you're at. Nothing's going to really shift that much. If you're not doing pure performance the last 2 weeks, then you screwed up. then the book is too hard, something went wrong, and you just gotta, you gotta work through it and still teach the kids what you can. But ultimately, the last couple of weeks for me is all about everyone kind of stand back. This is where the members take over, and we just kind of guide them in terms of pure performance. So when you get to the end, they have that golden gig where they can walk off and go, I have no idea what just happened, but that was really fun.
Yeah. That's why I was super bummed out, with the cancellation of the DCI season, because we had talked about what the return rate was at Pacific Crest, and I was like, holy smokes! If you and your team, your fantastic team, had done what they had done with a lot of because it's a lot to go on tour, just figuring out where I put my sleeping bag, I ran out of toothpaste and things. There's a lot of other things going on outside of just the rehearsal and what you guys had done. Then to take a bunch of vets, it was going to be some scary damage this summer. So I got
to admit, I was looking forward to it because the January camp, I did kind of show up a little bit more and step into some of the sectionals, because I like doing that, not to kind of get in the way, but just to see how quick students react and how quick you can get them to understand something. And it was pretty quick. I was going, yeah, we're on the right track.
Well, all those guys go back in 2021 and just take it to the next notch. So I got a few minutes here left, and I always kind of like to end on a fun note, but since we brought it up, tell me a little bit about that 1993 Blue Knights drum solo. And I talked to Mark Arnold a little bit about it at WGI last year, and just want to see if this all lines up with you and Ralph.
Okay, let's see what I remember here. We're going back 27 years now. I was living with Ralph in Colorado, in Denver that season, and I think I just moved out. And I was living with him. I think it was. But originally we were going to do. I think it was Mercury from the Planets, and I think we ended up using that for that little introduction was from Mercury, if I remember correctly. And all of a sudden, I'm not sure when the pivot happened, but Ralph just kind of said, "All right, we're doing this," and I listened to it, and I was just cracking up. I'm going, "All right." And I mean, honestly, the brass section was a little bit weaker that season, so giving them as long a break. But I mean, the meter changes in that were insane. I used to challenge drum judges the first time they'd see the show. It's all right, when we play the percussion feature, I'm coming back after you. You need to tell me what the time signatures are, and no one ever could, Nope. But that took a while. It took a while to get together. It was fun. I think it was, I know there's one part, like Ralph had me write one phrase. I always love telling the story because it's just funny. And it shows how honest we are with each other. Because it was towards the end, and he asked me, he kind of came out and said, here, man, write this next phrase. It was like you just write the battery stuff for this, I don't know, 16-bar phrase or whatever it was. So I was like, I got a little bit freaked out. I'm like, oh, damn, man, he's never asked me to do that before. So I was like, all right, I'm trying to be real careful, be very musical, of course, So I get done, and I hand it to him, and I'm kind of sitting watching TV. He walks up to me with the chart, because there was no computer charts back then. It was all handwritten. Just takes the chart, drops it on me, and says, we can do better than that, and walks away. So, I mean, I kind of went, okay. I sat down and didn't think and just wrote what I heard and gave it back. He's going, yeah, that's more like it. So I was like, I got out of my own way, basically. I was trying to be too careful. He's like, what's this?
But you gotta love the brutal honesty.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't offended in any way. It's like, if it sucked, then it sucked. Fix it. So I did.
I should just preface everybody, if you haven't gone back 27 years to look at that, go back and just find it on YouTube somewhere. It is a drum solo that just goes on for days. You can go to the concession stand and you come back and you can still be in it.
It's a piece. It's a movement.
It was fantastic.
There's a section because it has that little theme from was it E.T.? Boom, 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 boom. There's that little theme that goes over this one section, but there's a xylophone player that's holding down the 5/5/7 pattern the entire time, where there's all kinds of stuff just going over the bar line and all over the place. That's your one thing that you can latch onto to figure out what the hell's going on when you're listening to that section. So bump, 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 bump. That's there pretty much all the time somewhere.
That's cool. I'll have to go back and listen to that. Man, Glenn, thanks so much for popping in. This has been just a ton of fun. I know I wish we had more time, but so we will definitely come back and do this some more. Yeah, absolutely. This is your time.
Push at Pacific Crest. We just started this thing called Virtual Studio this past Monday. I'll be doing lessons. There's a few other percussion guys that aren't working full time right now that'll be doing lessons. Brass people. There's some visual stuff. We're going to start adding as much content as we can in terms of webinars and master classes. I'm actually working on something for kind of what we've been talking about today, a lot of teaching philosophy for like June or July. I'm just working on that, but check those out. It's going to be, we're going to keep building that and make that a consistent part of the organization now, because ultimately, I mean, really, we don't know what's going to happen next season. I hate to say that, but it's like you just don't know what's going to happen. So we're definitely making some pivots in terms of what we're doing educationally and trying to get to as many students as we can. And not just in Southern California, but around the country. But we have some really good teachers. I'm open for lessons, man. I got some room. I could probably pick up 10 and I would be okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll share that a little bit here, just a little bit. We'll grab that information and put it on there. Yeah. So there's plenty of room for Glen, everybody. Get in there. Take advantage of that. That's awesome stuff.
And everything with me, it doesn't even have to be about playing. It can be teaching. If you want to just talk about teaching, we can have a conversation.
Sure. Yeah. Well, hey, guys, thank you so much for joining us with another Focus Friday brought to you by Mapex and Majestic. Now it's a great time to go and practice. Come out of this better players, better people. Have a good one.